Broker Daily Business Accelerator. Surefire strategies and proven techniques to fast-track your broking business.
Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Great to have you with us. Alex Whitlock, Jason back with you. Business Accelerator. Jason, and apologies to everyone if you didn't tune into the last episode. I threatened Jason, which I don't do lightly, with chucking him in at the deep end this time. And I'm going to do just that, Jason.
I'm looking forward to it, Alex. And we're live on site today, which is fantastic.
We are indeed. It's a rare and pleasurable experience. Just a quick, and if you didn't get a chance to listen to last week's, I'd say, look, go listen to it. It was a really valuable podcast. Jason gave really important insights into taking a halftime break, if you will, a mid-year break. You know, why are we doing this? It doesn't have to be a set amount of time, but having some days to take stock of where you're going in your business, have some time to consider if you're enjoying what you're doing, you know, and if you're not, you know, start to do some diagnosis as to how to remedy that. You know, running a business is a struggle. It's particularly in mortgage broking, it's something which can lead to very, very long days. You have very little choice in, you know, and markets can change. And that can be good and bad. You can suddenly end up with a deluge of business, which means you're working huge hours, or things can turn against you. So check out last week's podcast. It's really about having that half-year review. But I did threaten to chuck you in the deep end, Jason. So look, one thing that you said last week, there were many things that you said, but one thing that you said that I really wanted to pick up on because it resonates with me is the confidence and ability to say no. Now, that's a really strange concept, I think. And I know there's a time for me as a salesman where I would never say no to anything. If I thought there was money on the table, I would put hours in. And I learned for myself, and I'll just give you a bit of a scope from my paradigm of selling advertising and media as I did back in the late 90s and into the 2000s, is it's quite interesting. You get a deal that would come up, and it might be somebody seems like a keen buyer, you know, and they want to buy the advertising that you're selling, and you end up in a situation where they're looking at buying one thing, and there's lots and lots of conditions attached to it, and it all needs to be done very urgently. Now, my very early learning was I have the same amount of time in my life as everyone else has. We all have the same minutes and seconds and days. So, but I would find that suddenly I would be sucked into investing my minutes and hours into something which, first of all, had very little return for me and often amounted to nothing. And I would find there would be a particular cadence with these particular deals that would come my way that'd be very shiny and sparkly and exciting because they seem like a quick and easy win for me as a media salesperson. And the best case scenario is I would put the same amount of time into that particular deal as I would into something that was 10 times the value. But often it amounted to nothing. And my minutes had gone, my hours had gone, my days had gone, and I'd missed out on other things. Does this relate, Jason, to mortgage and finance broking?
It is so relatable. One of the things that our industry doesn't do, it doesn't pay on time, complexity, or size. So, you know, a $2 million home loan or a $50,000 top up, 65 and 15 on average, but they can take the same amount of time. They can be super complex. That 50 grand top up for a pool might have, you know, 5 securities overlaid with it, and, you know, 4 trusts and a bankruptcy. So yeah, it's not an equal playing field that we have in front of us. And again, that idea of us, we talked a little bit last time about being people pleasers. You know, we want to help people. We want to get the best outcomes for them, but we're not generally putting ourselves in that equation. Is this the right deal for me? Is it the right deal for me to do for the client? Am I a facilitator or an educator? Like, what's my role here? Because I guarantee you 99% of the listeners, if I ask them straight out, will say that they've got clients on their base that they wish they didn't take on board. Not necessarily because they might not be profitable, or they might be, but they just weren't the right deal. It's not their sweet spot. They're not necessarily comfortable. They don't add the value that they really should be adding to their clients, and it just feels awkward.
I think there's many things that I'm gonna go into, but for right now, there's the right deal for me and there's the right deal for the client, and they're two totally different things, right? So, you know, and I know many brokers that I've interviewed, spoken to, worked with, that have said no to customers because it's not in their best interest. And it's funny, I've read some Google reviews where customers have been up in arms and they've scored brokers down. 1-star review. Oh, I talked to this broker and they wouldn't help me, and all the brokers that I know have a very, very significant sense of duty of care to their customer. But having the, saying, I think in some ways, Jason, the easier thing to do is to say no when you can clearly see it will put them in a worse financial situation or that it's almost going to be impossible to get that through. The harder thing is saying no for me as the broker. And you can end up feeling that you're almost, sort of part of the national health. Well, we don't have national health here in Australia, but it's almost like you're a service where you are duty bound to go and work for the customer and not to be paid by them. And you have to go away and get the outcomes that they want. Well, we're running a business, and we're putting our lives on the line. We're giving up time with our loved ones. We're not doing the things that we want to do, and we're entitled as business owners to have the power to say yes and no to the business we deal with.
Yeah, and I think as we get through today's conversation, and then I've got a little tip that I can give brokers to take away, I'd like to sort of get them to think about how they can flip the switch. And what I mean by that is that you'll find that most interactions between a customer and a broker is a customer interviewing the broker to see whether they'll use the broker. What we really need to be doing here is having the broker interview the client to see whether the client is going to be taken on board by the broker. And that takes a slightly different conversation. I'm going to give you a very easy thing later today on how to have that conversation. But I'd encourage you, again, this is to do your homework about the types of clients that are coming on board before they get on board. When you're thinking about the markets in which you serve, the commonalities of their problems that you can solve, you'll know the markets that you want to be in. And when you get things that are outside your lane, and I'm certainly not saying we don't want people to challenge themselves and to learn new skills, but do it in a controlled manner, because if you're ad hoc into these markets, if you're what we would call a dabbler, then is it the best outcome for everybody? And I'd probably suggest no. So if you want to open yourselves up to new markets, have a pathway to do that. Don't just jump in and dabble.
I think the saying no the saying no element is part of a much bigger ecosystem, and you can work out where you start and where you finish. So if you don't have much business coming your way, then you're going to have an inclination to say yes to everything that comes your way. So we've got to look at where this starts, right? So it doesn't start with the no. It starts with how you're generating your leads, how you're creating opportunities, how much of they're coming from existing customers, how much of them are sort of new and organic, either referred business. So we've got to kind of look at this no element in the right context. So if I'm just taking whatever comes my way, I'm probably going to say yes to everything that comes my way. And so it's hard to control that process. I think, you've got to look at actually being the master of your own destiny, what you're nurturing. And so, and the point that you make is, rather than being interviewed by the customer, see whether they're going to use you, is you're also really working out whether this is the right business. And it's going to be, and we need to have a very good measure of how long is this file going to take me to work on? How many, breaks are there in the pipe where it could fall apart, and at the end of the day, if it's unsuccessful for me and for the customer, that's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, again, it goes back to understanding, as I said, the markets that you serve. I think what's really interesting, because of the role that I get to play with the industry, so yes, team, I am out there peeking on your websites and look at your socials. And what I find, especially in the early days, is that the newer brokers to the industry and those that are in their first few years, they will be advertising their wares across a variety of different services. But as you look at the tenure of professional brokers, a Tom Hawley and Ben at Azura, or the guys at Smart Move, or the guys at Shore, or there's so many really, you'll find that they really start to niche down, and they actually serve a smaller market, but it's a more profitable market. And because they are then the experts in their field, they're naturally building businesses because clients are coming to them because they are the ones to see in that field. So, and you can have that across commercial. I was talking to Kevin Wheatley the other day, an amazing commercial broker. You've got people in the asset finance space that are, absolutely killing it in that space, but they're not trying to be all things to all people. And you mentioned the other day about the analogy with your doctor going in and doing a checkup. This is the difference between going to a GP and a specialist. And I think we have to start making, where do you want to play? And both those roles have roles, but you've then got to set your business up around understanding the role that you play. So it's an interesting way to think about it.
The way I view it, Jason, is everything is an education for us in business. I haven't been a broker, but I've been a salesman, and I've given the analogy of wasting time on things, but I've learned, right? And I wouldn't say I've only done it once. It's taken me a few knocks to realize the kind of business that I'm going to say no to. And equally for for mortgage and finance broking, you, as you quite rightly say, you get 10 years down the track and you know what you specialize in, but you don't know what you specialize in on your first day of broking. So I think that, and we're going to go back to this. We're focused on saying no, but I think you maybe say it's okay to say yes until you realize that it should be a no, and then you start to refine and learn and understand, and sort of tune the way you go forward. We'll take a quick break there, Jason. Look, when I come back, when we come back, I'd like to look at how, just with all this in mind, how let's start looking at, say, brokers that are starting out and they're tuning in because they want your guidance on how to grow their business. How do you kind of manage the customers that come your way? You obviously don't have a big sort of existing book where you're getting a lot of repeat business. So when I'm starting out and I'm getting, how do I work out what I take and what I say no to? Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Jason back, Alex Whitlock with you, Business Accelerator. We are looking at the art of saying no. So before we took the break there, Jason, I wanted to really focus for this section on brokers that are building their business. They maybe don't have sort of a large loan book where they can sort of go back over and look at refinancing clients. So it's all well and good saying we're going to say no to business. It doesn't make sense, but you've got to kind of, when you're starting out, you've got to take a lot of stuff that comes your way. How do we work out what we take? Do we take everything and just learn? What's the process?
Look, I'd love to say it's as easy as saying, look, just take it all on board and write it and get the outcome that's good for you. But if you're being honest with ourselves, I don't think that's a great outcome for the customer. So, and they're not going to come back to you. If you deliver, a pretty rubbish experience up very early in your careers, that repeat business isn't going to come. And we know that 60 to 70% of our business comes from word of mouth. So let's get ourselves off to a good foot. And I'd get you to ask probably 4 questions. One would be, of course, the old adage of, what problem has the client got? The second one would be, can you solve it? The third one would be, do you actually want to work with customers like this? Commercial, residential, investors, SMSF, asset finance. Is that the area that you're really passionate about? And Alex, you mentioned the word joy before, and I love brokers to find their joy and to really, because I can tell you, whenever I'm dealing with someone that is truly passionate about a particular area, it comes out of their pores, and I love it because they live and breathe it, and I can feel it in their words, and the passion's there, and you know what? They're the people I want to deal with. So, do you want to work with these people? And the fourth one, which is always a bit of a controversial one, is always, is it a profitable market? Is there an outcome that works for your business model in that particular part of the industry? So first home buyers, lots of brokers love first home buyers, and rightfully so, but there's a lot of brokers that love first home buyers. So if you're new to industry, then understand the competitive nature of that market, understand who else is working in that particular industry. And if you were to want to chase that particular part of the market, then what's your angle? Like, what's your take on it? What's going to differentiate you between you and your competitors? So there's sort of the 4 things that I get brokers to think about. And if you're not good at something, and I look at the old brokers that I used to run with ALIC, and, Mark and Kevin set that business up, with a very heavy investor focus. So residential investors, property investors, 70 to 80% of that business was that particular base. Now, when we came across deals that we weren't good at, so, non-conforming is a really good example.
Yeah.
We'd send it off to someone else, not because we couldn't do it. Sure, there were guys that could do it, but it wasn't our wheelhouse. We weren't great at it, and the customer experience would be better off somewhere else. And that's what they remember. A slow, do we want a slow yes or a fast no? Like, I'd take a fast no. No, we can't help you. We're going to put you in the right direction. Off they go, get a great experience, and it frees us up then to follow the markets that we truly are passionate about. So I know it can be really difficult to turn business away and turn good business away, but my question to you is that if you've got business on your desk that's there for 6 and 12 weeks because you're fumbling around with it, you don't know how to get this thing through, if you had to sent that off in the first few days to someone else, and quite, you can take, you can organize, some clip the ticket, or you can organize reciprocal relationships with other brokers out there, then what could you be spending that time doing? And it could be filling in a market that you're best served. So I just encourage you to be courageous when you're saying no. If you can spend that time doing things that you're better at doing, I think that's probably time best spent.
I'm going to pick up a couple of things there, of really good counsel. And I think knowing what to refer, or you know, maybe rather than saying no to, you know, rather than going, no, I can't help you, or no, I don't want to take that business on, is you, if you look around you, you will find brokers that may want to take on the things that you don't want to do, and they've got the capability to do them.
Yes.
Whether it's, you know, non-conforming is a very specialized area. Not every broker understands non-conforming. And it's interesting as well, so the mortgage broking business that we set up some years ago only does investors, because myself and my business partner Phil are investor, and we're very interested in that area. The interesting thing with the investor market is the deals are smaller, or typically for those brokers. We're not talking about the big, you know, we're a Sydney-based brokerage. You know, the average property is, I don't know, 1.6 million. We're not doing, you know, $1 million deals there. You know, they're doing often $500,000, $400,000, maybe some bigger ones, but they're exceptionally good at dealing with investors. They, you know, they understand a balance sheet. They can work with a trust structure, and they can do those deals pretty quickly, even though there's lots and lots and lots of lumpy bits to them. And they're good at that. Not everyone's good at doing those type of deals. So, but they didn't do a few years ago do sort of the asset finance commercial deals. So rather than fumbling about with them and spending the time trying to learn about those type of deals when they could be doing the, you know, so the deals they specialize in, they had a referral partnership, and they got a good referral partnership, a good referral deal, you know, a percentage of the upfront, and it was a tick and flick, and then the customer got a good outcome. So I really like the way that you've framed that around, particularly if you're starting out, start to work out what you want to do and what you're good at, and start to then find solutions. Because if you can find solutions for your for people who come to see you, and you go, look, I'm really sorry, I can't help you, but I have got a partner who does specialize in this particular area. Hey, you know what? That's a good outcome for everyone.
Yeah, I think there's and just a little tip for the team. This comes from one of the coaches I worked with for many years. And when we're doing the discovery call process, we used a really simple process to flip that switch flip that switch, which is, you know, you interviewing the client and whether you want to bring them on board, which is something on the lines of this. So Alex, we've got 15 minutes today before my next appointment. This is just a quick discovery call. My job is fairly simple today. It's to work out whether I can help you or not. If I can't, I'll let you know politely and point you in the right direction. But if I can, we're going to organise another time to go through your details at a greater depth. Is that okay? And what that allows you to do is to now you're in control of that situation. You're letting them know that I'm going to make a decision fairly quickly whether you're in the right wheelhouse. And if you choose to, you can opt out of that very quickly, versus when documents start getting handed across and when second appointments are made, or when the conversation gets deeper, that client's expectations have now moved to a relationship. You've now taken my pay slips and my balance sheets and, you know, the contract of sale, you're my broker. Whereas you might be sitting there going, well, now I've got to go away and see whether there's borrowing capacity or whether this is the type of deal that I want on board. You need to have got to that conversation before then, because you're now committed to that client, whether you like it or not. And that's where I think a lot of brokers in that discovery call process, they don't have the opt-out. We get too quickly into, well, send me some stuff, let me have a look at it, and then all of a sudden you're off doing 3 to 5 hours of work on borrowing capacity, and there may not even be a deal there. And this is why I do like better preparation for clients before that first meeting. I know a lot of brokers will cancel that meeting if clients haven't returned documentation, which I think is perfect, because we can't afford to go down the path of doing servicing calculations for everybody just to see if they service. That's not a profitable business model, and it will eat up your time. So again, I'd encourage you to try and use that conversation to steer it in a direction that works for both you and the client.
We're going to take a quick break there, Jason, and I'm going to jump on this. It's kind of this is the beauty of doing these podcasts. You don't quite know where they're going to go. This is something really, really close to my heart, and you've hit on something, and the way you frame that is music to my ears. So we'll take a quick break. I'm going to come back in, and we're going to have a look at the discovery process. We're going to look at the importance of this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Jason back, Alex Whitlock, Business Accelerator. We are looking at the art of saying no. We're kind of going a bit deeper into that and looking at really how brokers can really sort of frame what kind of customers they want to deal with. But Jason said something which really, really, really resonates with me to my absolute core, sort of going through the discovery process. And I'm going to grab on an element there, which is probably not your sort of your primary focus in your scenario, but something that I believe in fundamentally with sales is owning and controlling the process. Not the conversation. People talk about controlling a conversation. That's just weird. Like, nobody controls a conversation. But you have to be the custodian of the process. And in years and years and decades of selling, I know that if I own the process and set the cadence from the outset, it means that I can dictate the tempo within which that goes. Now, you know, I love the way that you frame it, where you're setting your stall out. You're saying the purpose of this meeting. I love it. You know, this is what I do, and this is what I train my salespeople to do. Tell them what the purpose of the meeting is. Own the meeting. I will usually say, you know, that it's going to take 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it's going to be required. So I own that time. If the prospect says, oh, I've got an appointment in 15 minutes time, hey, you know what? We can either reschedule or we can close it down. But I am then controlling the process. And I'm not being weird, and people who are non-sales people, you know, sometimes get a bit freaked out by sort of sales strategy. But controlling the process is the most important thing for everyone, for you as the custodian of the business and for the person you're looking after, because you're the person who's in charge. And if you do not control the process, it can then spiral. And this is where brokers lose their time. This is where the customer ends up paradoxically thinking they're getting poor service. So I know it wasn't sort of really the sort of focal point of this, but this what we're talking about here, from your first interaction with your prospect, educate them as to the way that you are going to conduct the process from here on in. You get a chance to set the standards, to let them know what to expect, to give them some promises and commitments about the service they're going to get, you know, and what they can expect, but also to say, and as you said, I will work out whether I can help you in this process. So I think that's absolute gold there, Jason.
I think the just thinking about all those things you just said there, and thinking about the difference then between being an order taker, which is then the client basically just telling you what they want, versus that strategy maker. My job is debt structure and strategy. It goes way beyond just facilitating, you know, an outcome by getting a loan for you. But unless we've had that conversation, unless we bring it to the surface, it feels, again, going back to this ideology, it's just this drive-through service. I pull up, I order, I go to the next window, I pay, I go to the window after that, I get my food, I drive off. Now, there are brokerages that provide transactional services, and that's okay too. And we don't want to ever say that that's not. I mean, that's what some clients actually just want. But as the industry evolves, and I think this is what we have to be brave and have this conversation, is that world is going to be supported very heavily by technology and by artificial intelligence. So the way forward for us is we need to double down on the human component, the connection piece, the empathy piece, the understanding the difference of human dynamics and what makes partners tick. And I always laugh about this when I come from an advisory background as well, that when we look at things like advice, the reason why advice is so difficult in our industry and financial advice industry is because when you put a couple down in front of you, there is no two couple on this earth that are the same.
Yeah.
Everyone's risk profiles are different. Their passions, their desires, their previous experiences, what they're anchored to, they're so incredibly different that you can't make assumptions about this. And this is where, again, these early day conversations about setting the tone of the relationship, that you are the expert in the field. They are coming to you for advice. If they're just coming to you for a transaction, there will become a time when that customer won't need to come to a broker. They'll be able to fulfill in a different way. So, you know, I really encourage brokers to really lean into understanding what their style looks like, how they engage in these conversations, not to race through the first part of the process that we just want to get to the next deal, or, you know, open these conversations up to being able to connect to the end, you know, clients, so that they see beyond you're just looking at the transaction to get some information out of them so you can go away, present something back. And I digress a little bit here very quickly, that there was some clients during the last couple of weeks that sent me some examples of an email they'd send out, which is around the SOCA side of things. So they'd sent their investment options out, or the loan options out, but they weren't getting, you know, great responses because they were doing dollar for dollar refinances, and they really couldn't show a huge differential benefit to the client to do the thing that they wanted to do. And what I noticed, that there was just a real lack of connection in the communication. So there was nothing about their future, what difference this would make to their lives if they could save $10,000 over the next 5 years. It was all just very much products, $27, $37 a month savings. And it just became very much like a receipt rather than an opportunity to connect at a human level about what's important to the client about their lives, their families, their finances, and that's, again, I just really encourage you all not to miss this opportunity when you're setting up these relationships.
So we're dealing in a business, as I said, and it's the way I view business, full stop, is we're dealing in minutes and hours, right? And yes, of course, there'll be a different commission based on the different size of the loan. But the long and short of it is you're dealing with a finite resource, which is time. So with lining up your discovery meeting, you're not just getting sort of the basics about understanding, sort of what you're dealing with and how the loan size is. You're educating the customer. And I think, and I'm not really qualified to sort of advise brokers, but from my perspective, I would be looking to, I'm going to be telling them the way I work. I'm going to be telling them that things will move faster and more efficiently if they're honest and upfront with me, because the number of times I hear about brokers where they've gone down the path and the customer, because they're desperate, they want to get the right outcome, they kind of keep things hidden. So you can coach the customer. Why do you coach the customer? If you can speed the process up without doing repetitive tasks to get one loan, if you can work out that it isn't going to go anywhere quicker, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling no, I'm sorry, I can't help you. For brokers, you get better utility from your time. You also, I think the sense of reward in working on efficiencies, and it's something you touch on every time when we catch up. This is the fundamentals of running a more efficient business, having a really good measure of the value of time and the time that you spend, and seeing deals that aren't deals. I get happier about kicking deals into touch sometimes than I do about winning business. There's something quite hollow about taking, in media sales, taking 3 months to get a sort of a tiny deal, which you kind of go, I wish I just, just punted it from the outset. So, look, that's all we got time for today, Jason. This time flies.
They do. It flies very fast when we're talking about things we're passionate about.
Yeah, it should be a Business Accelerator 24/7, perpetual, no sleep. No. Jason, I really appreciate you've come into the studio. It's great catching up with you face to face. I look forward to catching with you virtually probably next time. But wherever you're in town, it's good to catch up.
Absolute pleasure.
For everyone else, thanks so much for tuning in. We love having you listening in. We love the feedback. I know that Jason personally gets a lot of feedback, so please keep it coming. Check out Jason's day-to-day business, Broker Essentials. Jason's a first-rate trainer, mentor, and has led many, many brokers and broking businesses to success. So if you've not checked out his website, go check it out. We will catch up with you next week.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.